Welcome to Zoom In, Zoom Out, your global look at news from Taiwan and around the region. I'm Tiffany Wong. Myanmar's military junta seems to be losing ground in the country 3 years after they ousted Myanmar's elected government in a military coup. Before we dive into the future of Myanmar with our guest today, let's first take a look at the latest battles on its border with Thailand. In early April, armed resistance forces appeared to gain control in a key town near the Thai border, ousting around 200 junta soldiers and marking a significant defeat for the military, which has been losing ground in other parts of the country. But government troops later returned to the town, forcing the resistance forces to retreat. It's just one of many ongoing battles in a conflict that seems to have no end in sight. We just saw pro-democracy militias gaining ground in Myanmar, but does this actually mean that the military junta is losing control? To learn more about this, I'm joined today by Aung Kyaw Moe. He's the Deputy Minister of Myanmar's government in exile. Thank you for joining us today, Aung Kyaw Moe.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's first zoom in on the latest situation in your country. Recently, we've seen conflicts between the People's Defense Forces and the junta near Myanmar's border with Thailand. Who do we see gaining the upper hand?
And of course, across the country, the People Defense Forces, along or together with the revolutionary forces, are ahead of the journey. And there are significant amount of territory that's being controlled by the revolutionary forces and its allies, including People Defense Forces. And the development in Thai-Myanmar border has been also significant, and junta has lost almost everything there.
And where exactly do we see these battles between the People's Defense Forces and the junta happening? And where are the People's Defense Forces making ground?
It's across the country. It's coordinated, cooperated, planned strategically, and there are standalone battles, wars, and there are also coordinated effort together with the revolutionary forces. It's across the country.
Right. The military announced plans to conscript 5,000 young men and women a month. How are people feeling about this? And what does this say about the military's strength?
The junta is losing constantly across the country, and they are direly in needs of human resource because the casualties wherever they fight, they lose, and there are casualties across the country. And in response to that, the junta activated the conscription law, which is illegal and which people of Burma does not need to obey, but the junta is trying to enforce that across the country, including conscriptions against the Rohingya in Rakhine State. And of course, people in Myanmar have to little to no choice in confronting. But one thing that I can be very clear is that people of Myanmar are determined to be ending the dictatorship in Myanmar, and it will continue to use all possible means and avenue to go against the junta and end them, which has enjoyed a long cycle of impunity in Myanmar for the crimes that they have committed against the civilian.
We saw at the border town in Thailand that some of the military junta fighting there were actually defecting. Are we seeing a rise in this phenomenon?
There are also is historic number of people has been number of defector has been high compared to any other context that occurred in the past. And day by day there are people, but it could be there are rooms for accelerations and the velocity again. And there are defections, they are morally very low. They're not fighting because they believe in fighting, they are fighting against their own people.
The People's Defense Forces are made up of hundreds of militias all around Myanmar. So what's the driving force behind them?
And Myanmar people had have enough of dictatorship for the last 70 years, and equality, self-determinations, inclusivity are the principle that's inspired young people to take whatever means possible to go against the junta. The people of Myanmar started with little to nothing, and with little to no international support. But it's more than 3 years now that this determined mentality has been in accelerated phase, and And the result that has been generated over 3 years shows the level of effort that young people made.
At the beginning of the coup, there was the civil disobedience movement, and now we've also seen reports of young people trying to evade conscription by fleeing and even joining the People's Defense Forces. Could you talk a bit about these kind of movements to get youth support?
The civil disobedience movement has been very innovative in Myanmar. It has been one of the backbone of the revolutions when it is being started. There are hundreds of thousands of civil servants who refused to join the military junta to deliver the service or to work under their administration because junta does not have the legality and legitimacy to rule or to govern the people. It is a refusal to be governed by, and it is still the case. And many has been supported by the national unity government and its allies, and both mentally and physically, and we are continuing to do so. And it has been historic. There has been no such number in the history of Myanmar or anywhere else that civil servant has refused to join when a coup took place, and it will remain a very highlighted chapter of our history. And most of those people have joined, delivering service to the community where there are territories being controlled by the People Defense Forces or the revolutions or ethnic revolutions organizations, and many of them has joined as well in the leading role to take the leading role in the armed resistance in order to speak the language that the junta understand.
Now let's zoom out to look at how the region is being affected. These clashes within Myanmar have been spilling out on the borders with its neighbors, with the most recent battle for a trading hub right on the border with Thailand. How might this affect a democratic Myanmar's relationship with Thailand?
The prosperity, democracy, stability in Myanmar is not a liability to neighboring countries. It's an asset, and it should be in the national interest of the neighboring countries. And the prosperity, democracy, again, in Myanmar, equality in Myanmar will contribute a more cohesive region, a more cohesive neighbor, to be having a more peaceful neighbors, and also, the fact of the preventing transnational crimes that has been growing with the digital era. So we are consistently urging our neighbors to support the people of Myanmar over the junta, because people have spoken in various means to the junta and to international community as well, including our neighbors, and of course we are thankful to those who have been providing humanitarian assistance and providing support to our people on a humanitarian ground when they had to flee. And I think there is much more step that could be taken by our neighboring countries in order to make our country back to the path of democracy, which they will be able to benefit from as well.
Both ethnic minorities like Rohingya as well as military defectors have all been fleeing into border countries like Thailand and Bangladesh. How are the host countries dealing with this refugee crisis?
Conscription law, the revolutions, the resistance movement, of course, has created catastrophic situations, and it is not a choice, not the thing that the people of Myanmar has created. It's the military who created this catastrophe, and people who had to flee, the civilian who had to flee to neighboring countries, including Rohingya, prior even to the Spring Revolutions. Once they to survive, they were not migrating there for economic reason or for anything. It was on people were on a survival mode. So, as I mentioned earlier, we express our sincere appreciation to those who help us in this difficult time. At the same time, these security forces under the chain of command of the junta has been fleeing. For instance, in Bangladesh-Myanmar border, the border guard police are one of the main perpetrators against the genocidal attack to the Rohingya people. And 6 years later, these people, security forces, who committed crimes against the Rohingya atrocities, has to flee in a similar way to Bangladesh. And of course, they are responsible for war crimes, crimes against humanity, to genocide, and neighboring countries should be treating them with international norms and standards to bring the justice and hold them accountable for the crimes that they have committed instead of just peacefully or repatriating them back to Myanmar or handing them back.
Could you give us a general sense of the sanctions or economic pressures that international onlookers have given Myanmar or support to either the NUG or also the military junta?
So far, the National Unity Government and its allies did not get uh, amount of support it's required from international community from either financially, technically, or any other aspect. There is gap with, but junta has been getting support from like one or two like-minded countries that which support the dictatorship. And again, I think the international community as well responded with the statement of concern, condemning the attack. But it's the time to act, not release the statement or show the concern. And because it is not the language, the diplomacy is not the language that the junta understand. That's why the people of Myanmar started to speak in a different language, because diplomatic pressure alone doesn't work. And international community could do much more, parallelly, including more sanctions that will reduce or that will cut the legitimacy, finance, and weapons. And these three cuts is mandatory. If financial flow, if the junta is not able to get access to the financial resource they need, they will not last long on top of the all the constraint that's being created.
So, which countries are the ones that are giving all the support to the military junta?
It's apparently Russia that has been, if I have to name, and there are a couple of other ones, but not many people have treated them as government or recognized them as the government.
We're currently based in Taiwan, where many civil groups have been pushing for our government to do more for the people of Myanmar. What do you suggest international onlookers do to help their governments pay attention to the situation in Myanmar?
I mean, international community has done little to almost some country has done nothing, and it is a call for moral action and to support in Myanmar. Of course, the world has competing priorities, but the international community is capable of doing more than one thing at a time. Just because there are Ukraine, that doesn't mean that the catastrophic situations in the global south need to be ignored. And of course, we are in situations where resources are constraints and there are multiple other challenges economically, politically, and things like that. I think those we are in a race of in a race with authoritarianism and democracy. If authoritarian countries are able to support openly the junta to maintain the dictatorship, those who promote the democracy, who believe the principle and value of democracy, need to support the democratic movement, because it will bring collective. It should be in the collective interest of the global community and international community.
Thank you so much for joining us on the program today, Aung Kyaw Moe.
Thank you so much for having me.
This has been Zoom In, Zoom Out. For more stories from TaiwanPlus News, follow us on our social media. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Start your weekend with a cup of coffee and a moment to reflect on what happened this week.
Hello and welcome.
We've got you covered, from defense and politics to high tech and the arts.
Not just to Taiwan, the whole world is watching.
You make the coffee, we make the news. Here's what happened on TaiwanPlus.
In the face of adversity, the power of truth.
A roadmap for a just and open world, charted by the freest country in Asia.
Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
TaiwanPlus News, a voice of freedom in Asia.